the rackets. Don't be a wise guy. Don't get involved. Here's a man who made his living killing, and he goes to jail, and he comes out of jail after 30 years in prison, and he becomes a tie salesman. And he spent the rest of his life, selling ties and stuff, and he was not involved anymore.
Now, is it true that typically, Robert, when the police would ask them about who else is doing this, they would never rat on each other?
No, they had kind of a code.
Talk about that.
They would not.
Talk about
that. Well, there was a code where you did not turn in your friends. It was just like, because if you did, then they would, and there's no end to it. Yeah, they didn't. Even Arnold Rothstein, who really was not a gangster, he controlled mobs. He was a gambler, and he became famous in American history. And The Great Gatsby, Meyer Wolfsheim, and that story, and in Guys and Dolls, he's Nathan Detroit, and all this stuff. He supposedly, allegedly fixed the 1919 World Series between the Chicago White Sox and Cincinnati Reds. Chicago was supposed to win. He bet on Cincinnati, and lo and behold, Cincinnati won. He made a lot of money. He was shot at a card game, and he knew who did it. And when the police came, they asked him. He was not yet dead, and he could talk. He died later. And they said, tell us who did it. He said, don't worry, I'll handle it. And that's, in other words, tell them, for crying out loud. You just got shot by someone. Tell them. He wouldn't tell them. I'll take care of it. I'll handle it. And he never did. One of the newspaper's reporters said that he said, no, you're mutter. This kind of nonsense, New Yorkese or something like that. Yeah, they felt that, they would take care of it themselves. They would keep it within the business and don't let it outside. And they didn't. And they also kept their families out of it. There was a gangster in St. Paul, Minnesota, ran the city, and he was kidnapped and held for ransom. It started out $50,000. Eventually, they lowered it to $5,000. They got to $5,000, and then everybody who was involved in the kidnapping of him ended up dead with bullets in their head. Because he went after him, and then his daughter was kidnapped, and that's a rarity for those days. That's not today; it's then. They didn't bother the families. Well, his daughter was kidnapped, and he paid the ransom, and then he said he got her back. He said, "That's it. I'm out of it." He says, "I don't mind what they do to me, but when they start, attacking my family and harming my family, then that's it." And he got out of it and opened. He enjoyed sports very much. He opened a bunch of sporting goods stores, made more money doing that legitimately than he had made as a gangster during the bootlegging period.
Interesting.
But he got out of it because they did something to his family. She wasn't hurt or anything. They just wanted money. But he said, "That's it. I'm out of it." He just left it. He just walked away from the rackets and let others take it over. So there was kind of a code. I won't say they were all honorable men, but basically there was a certain kind of code. As someone once said to me, he says, "Look, I tried to make a living legitimately. I don't know how to do it. So I've always lost money legitimately." He says, "I know how to manipulate or maneuver in the underworld." He said, "We have our laws and regulations and sit-downs and this and that and the other." He says, I can make money that way. He was involved in international gambling stuff, illegal gambling here and there. That's part of it. They had the code. Today, I don't know. We hear about these things. They kill the whole family just to get at the one man who is the one they're after. They'll kill everybody, the wife, the children, everything.
Now, you're talking about general mafia, or are you talking about Jewish mafia in this last example?
No. There's no real Jewish mafia as such anymore. There are Russians who are involved.
Right. I was going to say to you that years ago, I was planning a trip to Russia, and someone pulled me aside and said, "Let me explain something to you. You can never do business in Russia unless you're going to work through the mafia there."
And there's a lot of corruption. Yeah. Police are involved, this, that, and the other, government and all this.
It was scary, and they said they'll kill everybody, your family, your friends, the people.
Oh, yeah, of course. So do they do in Mexico. They kill innocent people, slaughtering them, and Jews were involved in some of the nonsense. I don't want to say nonsense, but there was a restaurant in Detroit owned by a Jew, Bolesky's Delicatessen, and there was a mobster sitting there from the Purple Gang, and some Jewish hitmen from New York came. They were hired to take care of him, and they started shooting up the place, and they killed some innocent people who were sitting there just eating to get this guy, and that's a rarity. You wait till he leaves, and then you get him. I asked someone about that who had been, I don't want to say involved, I don't even want to talk about that, but I asked someone that I had spoken to, interviewed, about this incident. It was back in the 30s, and his comment was, I got him on tape, well, they shouldn't have been there. I mean, in other words, you're talking about the innocent diners. They shouldn't have been there, which is a stupid answer. I mean, they shouldn't have. They're eating. They don't know who the heck is sitting near them. And so, but basically, no, you just went after that person. You didn't hurt the family. Because if you start with that, then no one's safe. Your family's not safe. They all had children. They were married. They all had families. And you don't want your family harmed. You tried to keep them out of everything. And then if you start harming someone else's family, well, guess what's going to happen to you? Tit for tat, So they didn't. But that's then. This is back in the 20s and 30s, maybe 40s. Now it's another world now, I mean, violence is just, you can read it in the paper every day. I mean, it's crazy.
I don't read the paper. I no longer read the paper because I know that the paper is not news. It's not actually
sensationalism, and I know they try and sell the news. I mean, I'm from Detroit, so I follow the Detroit Tigers. When they lose, it ruins my day. So I don't want to look at the, in the morning to look at the internet.
Sports is a different issue. Let's talk about the anomaly of no killing on the Sabbath. Talk about that.
Well, the only one I came across was Sam Red Levine, who Lucky Luciano mentions in his memoirs. I mean, he was thinking that there would be a book about him, maybe a movie, and then he gets a heart attack at the airport and dies. But anyway, he said that he mentioned that he says he was a strange guy. He was one of my best shooters. He was a contract killer. Sam Red Levine from Toledo, Ohio, Orthodox Jew. Under his hat, he wore a skull cap. And Luciano said, he said that the man, went to synagogue regularly, and he prayed every day. He put on, his prayer shawl and this and that. And he said, strange guy. He says, he refused to take a contract to kill from Friday afternoon until Saturday night. But if he had no choice and had to do the job on Saturday, then first he would say his prayers, and then he would go out and do the job. So never on Saturday with Sam Red Levine. The others were not religious, although many of them did go to synagogue. Many of them were members of congregations, and their parents went to the congregation. They would go on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, and Rosh Hashanah, the New Year's, and stuff like that. I often wonder what they prayed about.
That's a great question. That would have been a great question to ask.
We have it here in Israel, too. We have a former president who was sentenced to 7 years. He's still running around. 7 years in jail for rape. And he goes to synagogue, and he refused to shake hands with a Reform rabbi. He says, because I'm traditional, we don't believe Reform is, kosher, legitimate. No, right. So what does he pray about in the synagogue? We have people from the religious party who've been in jail for bribery and fraud, breach of trust, and all kinds of stuff. And so what do they pray about? And what about the Ten Commandments? A very simple thing. Do not steal. Do not lie. I wonder, I said, what do these people pray about when they go to synagogue? For God's sakes, what are they doing? What is this about? Well, and they went to synagogue, there's one story, the Purple Gang, on a Day of Atonement, Yom Kippur, the congregation B'nai David, one of the officers was a father or uncle of the members, and the FBI and others knew that they were going to synagogue, and so they dressed up as Hasidic Jews, which there weren't that many then. It was before the Holocaust, so there weren't that many in the United States then. Hasidic Jews came over, and those who survived after the war. At any rate, they go to B'nai David Synagogue in Detroit, dressed as religious Jews, Orthodox Jews, and they sit in the back, and nobody paid attention to them, okay, because they blended in. But then during the intermission, on the Yom Kippur, there's a big intermission in the afternoon, and they went out onto the balcony, well, not the balcony, but they went outside of the synagogue and lit up cigarettes and smoked. Well, there you go. Their cover was blown. What Jew is going to be smoking on Yom Kippur if he's going to synagogue? I mean, you just don't do it. The Sabbath of Sabbath, it's the holiest day of the year, et cetera, et cetera. You don't smoke on that day. And they went, not knowing that you don't, they didn't know anything about the Jewish tradition, custom, and all this stuff. They did go to synagogue. He once gave a talk in a conference in France about it. I call them mobsters of the book, those who are religious. For example, Longie's Wilman, controlled New Jersey, Abner's Wilman. And I have this on tape where a good friend of his died, and he did not go into the funeral home. And the son of his friend came outside, and he said, Longie, He said, they called him Longy.